Hello, thanks for tuning in for another episode of the ICA Sports and Fitness Science Council's ChiroCast, where we come at you with some of the newest information for chiropractors and our council mostly about sports chiropractic. And this morning, a patient asked me about taking different supplements and why does a chiropractor recommend them? And I explained to her that when we do a chiropractic adjustment, we help the alignment get back, we help the biomechanics of the spine function better, and we help the nerve flow go back to the areas that have been damaged. But there's been a lot of inflammation, there's been a lot of stress in that area. Sometimes the body can lack the materials, the building blocks it needs to speed the process up. So, can you get better without taking supplements? Eventually. Can you get better faster, happier, and do better quicker with supplements? Yes. So, today we reached out to our friends at Modexis to talk about a couple of supplements that they have. And today we're going to start off talking about one that I use before and after I exercise, and that one's called Lift. And joining us today is Alan Ogden from Modexis. And I wanted to get the explanation of how this is going to help me hold my adjustment, heal better, do better, faster, straight from the horse's mouth. So here we are. Thank you for joining us. And if anything more you want to do so about yourself or let us
Sure.
know
Well,
about this
it's
lifting I'm
great to
taking.
meet you and great to be on here and talk to chiropractors. Just sort of a anecdote, I guess, or a side note. I have actually attended a chiropractor for 69 years. I was taken to a chiropractor when I was 3 because I had eczema so bad, and my medical doctor, or the medical doctor at the time, was like, "We got to try something." So it was sort of this last resort thing. But Dr. Ladd Parsons was my chiropractor, and I had the privilege of knowing Ladd and seeing him for the last time when he was retiring at age 100. So, really amazing individual, and what a contribution. His clinic still exists. It's on the fifth generation now. And we had many conversations about just exactly what you said and chiropractic releasing the tension, opening up the nervous system, allowing for the nerve function. And of course, there's so many different ways in which the nerves and the muscles and you have to be connected. So I'm a great believer in chiropractic, even though I went to school and took pharmacy. I'm a geriatric pharmacist, basically because I knew I was going to be older longer than I was going to be younger. And then I also took pharmacognosy. Now, pharmacognosy is not very well known, but pharmacognosy is actually the use of medicine as plants. So I was able to do a lot of work in that area using plants as medicine years ago when we could do more of that. And then I took genetics, and currently I'm not practicing pharmacy, I'm actually practicing genetics. And in the genetics, we look at what are the nutritional needs that people would require and also their macronutrients and so on. But today we want to talk about Lift. It's a product I use as well. And there's many conversations going on about our brain and what happens and the fact that people are scared to get old physically, but their brain gets old earlier. And they're losing the ability to function. They're losing some memory. They get worried about that. So there's a lot of talk about nootropics. Nootropics just being a word that really indicates something that we're going to use for the brain. And so we created Lift with this in mind. This is a unique formula, Lift. I don't know if we can get that to maybe focus a little bit better, but it's a beautiful purple formula. Lift is a combination of ingredients that encourage, first of all, they encourage blood flow. So without blood flow, we can't really do anything. I mean, it's very difficult. And when we look at what happens to people as they get older, certainly blood flow is one of the challenges in the brain. We're not getting enough blood, enough oxygen. And so Lift is this special blend of different things that synergistically work towards this goal of getting more nutrients, more blood flow to the brain. And you mentioned that you use it before and after working out. And there's a particular reason why that is helpful. We'll go into that in a minute. And don't let me forget, please, Brant, that I want to talk about that. But first of all, I want to talk about nootropics in general and why we would use those. One of the things that is of great concern is how the ability of our brain actually to detoxify. So if people are not sleeping well, and of course, chiropractic is one way to help people sleep well, relieving the tension on their spinal cord and getting some more blood flow and nerve connections there. But if people are not sleeping well, then the glial cells in our brain don't have the ability to trigger this detoxification during REM sleep. And that is a really huge challenge because if we can't detoxify our brain, if we're not getting the sleep, if we're not getting the rest, if we're not able to get the cortisol out of our brain, then we're already in a situation where things aren't going to work as well. So we've put uh, alpha GPC into this. Alpha GPC supplies choline, and choline is a product that helps us to actually detoxify our brain and keep the brain function. We've put some alanine in there and we've put some other ingredients. So when you look at this formula, you'll see several ingredients. And I think the thing for people to keep in mind is that everything that's there is in the ingredients in and of themselves are at a level to to support this synergistic activity. So somebody looks at it and says, "Oh, it's only got a little bit of choline." Yes, that's true, but it has a little bit of alanine. It has a little bit of this. It has a little bit of that, because together they actually work as a unit to do what we want to do: detoxification, better clarity. So let's talk about the 120 milligrams of caffeine that is in the lift and why that's important. You're
Can I interject real quick? So, what I'm hearing from you is that if I have a patient that can't hold their upper cervical adjustment, like a C1 adjustment with the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic innervation, we talk to chiropractic about thoughts, traumas, and toxins are reasons why people can't hold their adjustment. And when I define the word toxin, I think of both being toxic as something you're not supposed to have, but also being
Yeah,
very
correct.
deficient in something you're supposed to have. So if we're deficient in things and our glial cells aren't doing their job, and I had a patient that wasn't holding their upper cervical adjustment, this might be a consideration for me to supplement with the adjustments that I'm doing
That's
to make my
absolutely
adjustments last
true.
and do
And I
better.
think that that would be very helpful for that person. So, when we think about the brain, it's 70% fat. And when we think of toxins or things that, from the environment or from food or from medicine that we might be taking, they're all very, very fat labile. In other words, they're easily absorbed by fat. So if we're not efficient at detoxing those out of our brain, then we're already in problems. And so that's a really great point that you made, and especially with the C1. And I don't think people really understand the power of a C1 adjustment, or even know maybe what that is, or an Atlas adjustment. Sometimes I believe it's called as well. And they just
That Dr. Judson would say, get your Atlas checked one of our board
get your
members.
Atlas
It's
checked.
that's his
Yes.
tagline, get your Atlas
Just a
checked.
just a little side story. When I was going to school in Phoenix, I had this massive headache, and I didn't know what it was, what it was really. If it was the heat, I'm not used to the heat, what it was. But I went to an Atlas orthogonal chiropractor. I'd never heard of one before, and had that my very first significant Atlas adjustment, and what a difference that made. Wow, it was incredible. And so I'm definitely familiar with the Atlas. So the caffeine, so you'll see that there's 120 milligrams of caffeine in this. Now you mentioned work.
This is why I use it when I
Yeah,
lift.
yeah, I
Is that what you're
wanted
talking
to
about
to
now,
to,
the
to
workout
explain
part?
why
Why I'm
that's
taking it
in
for
there.
that?
So there's a lot
Cool.
of research currently, and I think one of the things that a lot of people don't understand is in our cardiovascular system, we have something called mechanocytes. So mechanocytes are literally little pressure gauges. I think would be the best way to explain that. And so if we're not getting good nerve flow, if we're not getting good blood flow, and these mechanocytes are not being triggered like they should, then there's a lot of downstream reactions that can happen. So when we're working out like you are, a little caffeine. So while we ordinarily think of caffeine as just being something that'll wake our brain up, kind of from a fight or flight reaction a little bit. But actually, caffeine has an activity on these mechanocytes, which changes their function. And it allows for a couple of different things in our body. One is while we're doing what would ordinarily be anaerobic exercise, in other words, we're not using oxygen, the mechanocytes will allow us, if the caffeine is there, that it will allow us to access body fat about 15 to 20% better. So generally, when we're in anaerobic phase exercise, we're just using our glycogen stores. We're just using what's there. We're not really accessing our fat. But if we have some caffeine, it will allow us. And of course, that's much more efficient energy for our brain using fat, having ketones, than having just straight sugar. So there's a great effect from that 120 milligrams of caffeine. You take 60 milligrams before exercise. I take 60 milligrams and I take the other capsule after my exercise because I want the delayed effect to keep those mechanocytes functioning. They also, when we stimulate those mechanocytes, we also get a stimulation, a feedback mechanism whereby we will secrete human growth hormone. And that's a really important thing, particularly as we get older and we're still working out, we're trying to be our best, preserve our lean muscle mass. So having a little extra push on the excretion of human growth hormone is also very good for us. So this is a really significant combination of ingredients that are not only going to help us with our cognitive benefits, just that we would expect from a nootropic, where we're going to have a little bit better ability to function from that point of view. Our memory is going to be a little bit better. We're going to be a little bit sharper when we're at work. But there's so many downstream benefits from this that last throughout the day. And one of the things that I like about when you temper the caffeine with these other nootropics, you don't get this sudden peak in caffeine and then the sudden fall. So, if we just use coffee, for instance, somebody has a cup of coffee, they drink their coffee, and the half-life of their caffeine is about 2.5 hours. So we get a peak, we get a fall. But because we've put these other ingredients in there, what we have then done is we've slowed down the metabolism of the caffeine. So we now have something that's going to last us maybe 5 or 6 hours. We're going to have a much softer rise, but we're going to have a much longer benefit from that. And that's one of the real advantages to lift over any other type of caffeine containing product. Pre-workout products, many of them will have 200 or 300 milligrams of caffeine or some, and then an assortment of amino acids, but that isn't what our brain needs. Our brain's not needing those at that time. It's definitely needing the alpha GPC, it's definitely needing the alanine, it's definitely needing these other ingredients. So this is a product that is really useful. What if you're not working out? Well, you'll still get the benefit of this. And if you take it in the morning, I like to divide my doses because then I can, take a capsule in the morning, a capsule mid-afternoon, and I now have this benefit throughout the day. So that's lift in a nutshell, if you'd like. And maybe you have some questions, Brant, about lift that you'd like to ask me, or some experiences you'd like to share as well.
Well, I guess there's people out there that get hesitant because they heard the word caffeine. Like, hey, every time I drink coffee, I get a headache. Caffeine and I don't get along. But I'm understanding is because of the slow release, these people should experience a different result than drinking a cup of coffee because of the slow
Yeah,
release of
that
it.
is exactly right. So my personal experience, if I have a cup of coffee, two things are going to happen. One, I'm going to feel the stimulus throughout my body. I'm actually going to even feel the stimulus in my intestinal tract and may have to go to the washroom very quickly. I never get that with lift. So lift, you take your lift, you don't feel that
Right?
vibratory movement through your body, and you never feel like a lightheadedness or a sharp jolt in your brain. You just get this really, over time, suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, my brain's working better. I'm feeling better. I'm feeling more energetic. And so, to tie that back into an adjustment, I think this would be a fantastic thing. Somebody comes in, they're looking for that C1, the Atlas C1, that release, and then you allow for some extra blood flow, some extra nutrients to head up there. I would think that they would hold their adjustment a lot longer. I'm not a chiropractor, you are, but I'm just looking at the science of this and going, we're getting oxygen, we're getting nutrients up there that's really going to stabilize what you've stimulated through the nerves in the brain.
Absolutely. So this is really good, but the main reason one of the reasons I get adjusted is I want to stay healthy and I want to live a good, healthy, long life. And I wanted to add, was it try to be healthy in my older age as you add years to your life, not life to years, or try to make myself, I can enjoy my retirement and my later in life. That's why I exercise. That's why I get adjusted every week. And that's why I do the things I do. But I understand too that there's another
Oh,
product you guys here called longevity that's designed for that. And I want to know if we could do a part two on this where we tackle the longevity. So if we wrap this one up now, could we do another podcast about longevity and
absolutely.
people
We
can
sure
jump on
can.
for
I
part two? Does that
love
sound
to
fair
talk
to
about
you?
longevity. It's one of my favorite
All
products
right.
for sure. Let's do that.
Well, let's wrap this podcast up and thanks for joining us. And I just got to promise that we'll do a part two. So we're going to do a part two. And so if you're listening to this, come back in a couple weeks and listen to part two. Thank you for tuning in. Alan, thank you
Been
for
my pleasure,
joining
Brent.
us.
Thank you.
And we look forward to part two.